Hello and good afternoon. My name is Elena Ortega-Guisado, and I did my book review on Little Fires Everywhere, and I laid it out in the form of a PowerPoint presentation to make things more organized, to lay it out in a pretty and sort of chronological order in a way that the themes make more sense one after the other. And this overview, this audio voiceover is going to be me sort of going through the slides, but not reading off of them, just me going through specific details that I noted in the novel that portray those themes and that show both perspectives of that theme, which I think is very important to consider all sides of a situation and to just say your opinion with an open mind, because there's so much to say, especially with the very controversial topics that Little Fires Everywhere explores. So we're gonna sort of mentally prepare ourselves, because it's a lot to handle these themes. They're not to be taken lightly, because everyone has different opinions, and it's just you have to be very careful with your word choices. That's why I'm going to be trying to talk a little slower, because that way I get my full thoughts across and you can understand where I'm coming from or what point of view I resonate more with. Although I will be explaining both points of views and how I understand each point of view and why I don't understand each point of view, because I myself haven't even decided where I stand on these topics. I'm still learning a lot, and I'm still a teenager. I feel like I have a lot to learn, and that's why I'm so grateful for this class and for reading these books, because I already learned a lot, but I'm still getting there slowly but surely. So just to prepare yourselves, the topics that we're going to be going over are motherhood, identity, and rule following. Rule following, more specifically, conforming to society and what society expects from a woman. However, before we dive into those themes, I want to give a quick introduction to Little Fires Everywhere. I'm going to be presenting this podcast / voiceover as if the listener had no idea what this book was about, even though I'm pretty sure Mrs. TA is listening. I'm sure you obviously know everything that I'm going to be talking about, but I'm going to be saying it in a way that any listener can understand what I'm saying and where I'm coming from, so I feel like this introduction is pretty necessary. So, Little Fires Everywhere, the way that I grasped it by the end of the book was sort of a tension, a growing ball of tension between two very different families from very different backgrounds. One, the Richardsons, a white two-parent household with great financial backing and just the ability to do almost anything because they can. They have the money, they have the connections. And another family, which is just a single-parent household with a single child, low income and racial minority, who apartment surf until they can't pay for rent and they have to move to another city where they can afford rent. And it was sort of like fate brought them together. The rent was very cheap, and Elena, at the same time, the mother of the Richardsons, she thought that she was doing a great active philanthropy, I think is the right term. She was donating, basically giving shelter almost for free, because the rent was so low, to Mia and Pearl, who were super grateful for the opportunity, of course. And so, they both benefited from that situation, and they were both brought together because of that rental situation. And they get even more tied with one another because of the friendships and relationships between the children, right? There's Mia, who had Pearl, and Pearl was a single child who obviously wanted to make new friends because she's in a new city, and she got pretty close with Moody, who is Elena's son. And Moody and Pearl really hit it off. They're super great friends, and Pearl starts visiting the Richardsons' house very often, and this is sort of what begins the tension between the two families, because Mia is asking herself, where's my daughter? Why is she spending all this time at the Richardsons' house? We are not their friends. But then she came to an understanding, like, oh no, this is just Pearl and Moody spending time together. It's not such a big deal. But then it did become a big deal when she was beginning to work for Elena, and I feel like that was a boundary that Elena crossed, offering a job to Mia, a cleaning job specifically. And that is slightly offensive because, first of all, she, had to guess that she was unemployed, and then sort of made up this job so that she could help Mia be at the house more often, where Pearl spent a lot of her time so that they could both be together. So definitely not ill-intended on Elena's part, but she was definitely blind to how she could hurt someone's feelings by being so welcoming and so too charitable, right? So that's the whole tension aspect of the story, where even more events grow out of this tension, and that grows the tension even more. So let's just start off with the first theme. So the first theme that I highlighted and found super important was motherhood. The question is constantly brought up throughout the book, not literally, but contextually. You get to ask yourself so many times, like, what makes a mother? Like, who gave you the title mom? Did you earn it? Is it a privilege? Does it come alongside with giving birth, or is it something that you have to work to maintain throughout your life? It's something very important to consider is what makes you a mom, right? And something that I wanted to talk about as a subtopic of motherhood is nature versus nurture. It's a brief the definition of each word. Nature is the giving birth, the action of giving life to an organism, a human, or passing on your genes to a child. That child is biologically your child. You created this child. And nurturing is what comes after birth. It's all that the child experiences in their formative years, where they learn who they are and who they want to be, where they learn what relationships are worthy and which relationships are not so good. And it's a whole different world than nature, because nurture is just, it's helping your child and guiding your child through their young years to help them experience life in the way that you want them to experience it. And I think part of it is also loving your child and accepting your child, because nurturing is not just, teaching them about, like relationships and friendships and this is good and this is bad, but also letting them know that they have a mother, that they have someone there that is constantly looking over them and constantly cares. And so I feel like that's the big difference between nature and nurture that is important to keep in mind when thinking about motherhood. So let's talk about a specific event in the book. So Elena is Izzy's mom. And Elena sort of raised all of her kids to be these well-rounded individuals with good grades and a drive for athleticism and motivation and wanting more in life and working hard to achieve what Elena achieved in her lifetime, or even more, right? But Izzy was the youngest and sort of like the rebel of the family, and she didn't have that same initiative to have that sort of lifestyle as her siblings. She met Mia, Pearl's mother, and she immediately fell in love with what Mia does, taking photographs and creating art. It's something that was never introduced to her prior, and Izzy found a passion for that. And this is where nurture kicks in. Izzy found a good grounds for a relationship with Mia, a sort of maternal figure with Mia, and she found something in common with Mia. But she never had that with her own mom, Elena, her biological mom. She never agreed with Elena or found things that she did ridiculous, but she just automatically clicked with Mia and her hobby, and it was a sort of new learning experience for Izzy after that point of meeting Mia. But this shift in Izzy's life between looking up towards her biological mom and looking up to Mia, a non-related maternal figure, is just one of the smaller events that created tension between the family. There was definitely more to the story that created animosity between the two families, or specifically the two mothers. So let's take a look at those differences. Another subtopic alongside nature versus nurture is maternal affection and sacrifice. There are the basic necessities that a mother has to provide for the child, water, food, shelter, clothes. But then there's that extra step that a mother does so that their child can experience the best life that they can. In Mia's case, this is very clear. She drops out of art school in order to provide for her child. And that's just not something you take lightly. Mia has a strong passion for art, and the only thing strong enough to divide her from that passion for art was the love for her child, the child that wasn't even born yet. And I think that says a lot about Mia's character and her will to make sacrifices. It says a lot. It says a lot about her position as a mother. And in the book, if you pay close attention, Mia doesn't have any relationships, any love life. It's like she put that on hold too to provide for her child. Unless maybe we can consider that she was asexual and just had no interest in finding love for herself, but it's not explicitly mentioned. So maybe she wasn't asexual and just completely put a stop in finding a husband or finding love or finding and creating this life for herself so that she can take care of Pearl, who was a baby and a child and later a teenager. And now if you think of Elena's situation and her as a mother, what exactly has she sacrificed? That's something to think about, because I'm trying to recall a part in the book where she actually sacrificed something that was her own, right? And I can't really say that Elena has sacrificed for her children. Maybe the sacrifice was that she didn't want a fourth child and had the fourth child anyway, because it probably would have portrayed her as a bad person if she decided to not have Izzy. But that's not really sacrifice. It's the sacrifices that matter once you are a mother to that child, not the sacrifices you make before that child is even born. That's not something you're doing for a child, it's something you're doing for yourself. The sacrifices that you do for your child is what matters and what reflects on your character as a mother. And now, to conclude the theme of motherhood, I wanted to wrap things up with my personal conclusion of what I think motherhood is. I think it's what a mother does to raise that child in a safe and happy environment. And sometimes that takes sacrifices, right? But you do them because you're a mother. I don't care if you only gave birth to that mother. I don't care if you almost passed away giving birth to that child. That doesn't make you a mother. It's what you do after giving birth. That's what would make you a mother. And I see it clearly in the situation that my mom was in when my brother was 2 and when I was a newborn. She dropped everything, her family, her friends, her entire life, everything that she has known in her home country, Peru, to come here to America to provide better education, a better life, and a better future for my brother and I. And that is the biggest sacrifice that anyone can do. Dropping everything that you have ever known for someone else. Not just someone else, for your kid. Because you want them to have a happier and more successful life than what you lived. And that's why I came to my conclusion of motherhood, because I don't personally know what motherhood is, but I have definitely seen it in the case of my own mom. Now let's hop into our second theme of identity. And identity is a really big topic in Little Fires Everywhere, especially with sexuality and just knowing who you are as a person, which could include, your racial background, your financial background. A lot of it sort of creates who you are as a person and therefore your identity. So we could quickly recall that we talked about Izzy finding a connection with Mia and sort of looking up to her and appreciating the attention that she would receive, right? And Mia was the one who introduced her to the idea of, hey, expressing yourself in the way you want to and doing the hobbies that you like, what makes you, do it. Don't be afraid to go out there and express yourself and portray yourself as who you really are. So Izzy sort of went through this change where she became comfortable in her own body, and a lot of it had to do with that relationship that she created with Mia. But on the other hand, the other subtopic of identity, specifically race and class and how that can create you and who you are as a person, your identity, I feel like race is very important to consider because of how much it can introduce you to. Your race and your background, where you come from, introduces you to this whole new world of culture and a different lifestyle that you are familiar with here in America. And I am personally familiar with this because I would visit Peru every year, and I saw huge differences between the culture there in Peru and the culture here in America. And I didn't pick and choose what I liked about each one. I sort of grew up more Hispanic because both of my parents are Peruvian, and I'm so grateful for that because I can see how the American lifestyle is different, and I sort of to an extent can choose whether or not to partake in those American traditions, but I just love knowing where I come from and being so involved in my culture, speaking Spanish fluently, knowing every family member, distant family members, family friends, close relatives. Like, I'm so grateful for all of it because I do consider myself more Peruvian than I do American, and I don't know how I would have reacted if I was, say, adopted into a white family. And this is how I looked at Mei-Ling's situation in the book. Because in my head, I'm telling myself, no, Bibi needs custody of this child because only Bibi can offer that 100% genuine, real experience and culture. I think immerse is the right word, immersing that baby into that culture, teaching the baby her language and taking that baby to the town where she's from. I feel like that is so important because I can't imagine being in a group of other people who look like me. Brown, dark curly hair, brown eyes, clearly Hispanic, right? But I can't imagine being the only one who doesn't speak Spanish, or I can't imagine being the only one who's not familiar with their blood country. It's just the matter of being the odd one out, and I am so grateful that my parents continued on with the Hispanic culture here in America and in our household, because I know that I am not that odd man out. I know that I am Hispanic. I can say pridefully, oh, I speak Spanish, and that's just what I was rooting for Mei-Ling. I wanted that for the baby, and sure, her adoptive parents could have given her more financially, but that's not what makes a child happy. And I'm sure Bibi could have done more to provide the basic necessities for the child, but it's not the superfluous materialism that wins over a child or that makes that child have this ideal life. No, because when I was young, my family didn't have much. We grew on food stamps and went to thrift stores to buy toys, and I shared clothes with my older brother. But I remember living the happiest and funniest and the most exciting childhood. So everything that was in favor for Mei-Ling's adoptive parents and McCullers, I was just like, well, the baby doesn't need that. The baby needs to be familiar with their culture because they feel so left out. They feel like they missed out on this whole world of culture and just where they're from, and it's just not a fun feeling. It's like you're lost. You don't know who you are anymore. You don't know if you're American, if you're something else. No, you can't put a baby in that situation. So in Mei-Ling's situation, I'm just so happy that Bibi did what she did, taking her child and taking her back to her country and doing it illegally, right? Taking Mei-Ling out from the McCullough's house, but I'm glad she did because now Mei-Ling's gonna grow up in her blood country, and that's just something that the McCulloughs could have never offered. I will say the only downside of how Bibi dealt with her situation with her baby was how she approached leaving her baby because she couldn't care for her. It was cold and it was out in the open where there's probably crazy people roaming around. You don't know what could happen with your child. It's just, she probably was just scared doing something and heat of the moment, leaving your child in front of a fire station. That's just the one downside. You put your baby in danger once, then who's to say it won't happen again? Because it could. But then again, she did so much to get her back, and so I feel like she redeemed herself, and that's just something to consider in Mei-Ling and Bibi's situation. And to wrap up the topic of identity, let's quickly go over class, financial class, and social status, and how that affects your identity and character development. Mia, she went through a lot, with her pregnancy and leaving art school and moving from apartment to apartment to make ends meet. I feel like that added a lot to her character. She is mentally stronger than the common person. She can say that she's sacrificed more than the common person, and that makes her the kind of person she is, right? One that's willing to do anything for her child, and that plays a lot into identity and Mia's identity specifically. And it sort of does the opposite for people who grow up in a high status and financially financially well off family, because that child grows up getting everything handed to them, or at least knowing that they're a step away from anything that they want. And so they don't have to work for what they have. They don't have to make any sacrifices, say, for the things that they need or want in life. And so what character development do they gain? Almost nothing. Maybe if they're told no, that's the only character development they gain, being denied. But that's the most compared to what a low-income individual goes through. Being told no is just part of it, and you're used to it, and it doesn't affect you like how it would, like it would to someone in Elena's situation, for example. Just a quick side note: saying Elena a lot is very, very funny because my name is Elena, so it's very difficult to talk about Elena in a slightly negative way. Yet it's just I'm kind of used to it now because I've been saying her name a lot, but it's just funny. Moving on, I wanted to talk about conforming to society, specifically women conforming to the expectations of the contemporary society. The last thing that I wanted to go over was just conforming and obeying by the rules that seem to be written somewhere and that we all seem to know somehow, but just the unspoken rules that has been slowly built into our society over time, and now it just seems like they're the default rules that women have to follow. So I really wanted to use Elena as the model for this. So I sort of drew out a little diagram of, what it is to be a woman and what a woman should do in today's society. And the first thing is look pretty. Appearance says it all, doesn't it? I'm being sarcastic. But Elena, she's well-dressed every morning. She's the type of person to wear heels on a Sunday morning, to have matching suits, matching sets for work, and her makeup is always done. She's just so well put together. And maybe it's all an act to cover up how she's feeling on the inside, but that's just the first step to it all. It's just looking pretty. And then being nice. She is so nice. She's so charitable and so, I'm not sure how to translate this word, but philanthropic. She has that aspect to her, actions of philanthropy, of donating your services or not being selfish and giving what you have, giving the extra that you have to those who need it. And that's just the kind of person she is. And it seems genuine, and it is genuine because there were no strings attached whatsoever on her end towards Mia and her daughter. So that was just the second rule of being a woman, being nice. And then the third one is being smart. She went to college. She has this really great job where she works at a really good company, and she is a breadwinner for the family alongside her husband. And that's the third topic that she checks off the list of being a exemplary woman in society. And then perfectionist. She is a perfectionist, and especially in the Hulu series, I don't want to bring up the Hulu series because that's not what this is about, but she's definitely this sort of, I don't even know the term, but it's like she'll get overwhelmed if something's not perfect, right? She does all these things, like the house is tidy and she's tidy and her family is like picture perfect family, and so she considers herself a perfectionist, and that's another check on the list. And then just conforming to society. All of those things that she's doing, looking pretty, being nice, being smart, being perfectionist, that's conforming to society's expectations, and she just goes along with it. And she doesn't seem to have a problem with it because she's so used to it, and it suits her so well, but she's just the woman that I wanted to outline for what kind of woman that society expects us to be, because Elena checks off those boxes. Definitely over 20 minutes, but just to let me quickly wrap this up, I believe that I just have a few more little things to go over and then a quick little summary. So I wanted to talk about the level of difficulty it is to conform with society's expectations. And what happens if you don't, or if you don't want to, and, making mistakes, and if those mistakes go against what a woman should be doing according to society's expectations, then what do you do? What happens? Let's look at Lexi, for example. She gets pregnant, and that's just not a good look on a high school student. Not even that. This was after she broke up with her boyfriend. After her and her boyfriend broke up, and she ends up being pregnant. That's twice as bad of a look than just being pregnant in itself. And she's just like her mom. She wants to be this perfectionist, and she wants to be the exemplary woman that society wants women to be. So what does she do? She uses Mia to go to the clinic and use her name as if Mia were getting the abortion, but Lexi would be getting the abortion because Lexi's the one who's pregnant. So just to save her own image, she sort of not uses, but accepts the assistance from someone who doesn't really care to check off those boxes of being a perfect, quote-unquote, perfect woman, right? So it definitely shows the contrast between conforming to society versus not conforming, because Lexi's doing everything she can to be this perfect daughter, perfect student, perfect girl, and Mia is just along for the ride, and she seems to be getting hit with all the consequences. And what's so impressive is that, not Mia, my bad, Pearl, I think I said Mia the entire time. Pearl was, Pearl, used her name under the abortion procedure for Lexi. But what's so impressive is that Pearl doesn't mind. It's like she doesn't care what society has to say. And that is so impressive. And it's just something that I look up to, because I wish I can look at society and say, I don't care. What are you looking at me for? I'm doing my own thing. You do your thing. Like, what I do doesn't affect you. And I just wish that Lexi had that thought process, because she just owned up to her mistake. If she had just said, okay, I got pregnant, let's fix this and undo our mistake, let's learn from it and not let it happen again. But that's not what she does. And I feel like if the rules were switched, Pearl would have never used someone else's name to get an abortion. Pearl would have owned up to her mistake. And that's just something that I really highlighted when I read the novel, that little portion of Lexi and Pearl going to the clinic together. Very last subtopic of conforming to society's expectations is living vicariously through a child. I feel like this is very, very apparent in Elena's family situation, where she tries to make her children these perfect, well-rounded little individual people, little kids who do the same thing as her, essentially, have a well-rounded life, they start their own perfect little family, and it's sort of as if she's forcing it onto them. But one of her children is too smart for that. Izzy doesn't fall for it. She doesn't like the idea of being this posh little daughter who gets everything handed to her, basically, and she sort of fights against that will that Elena wants, that vicarious living that Elena wants to do through them. Izzy fights that. I'm not sure if I worded that correctly, but I'm sure I got my point across. So Izzy sort of fought against that. She resisted, and that was also one of the things that started the tension off between the two families. And then at one point, Izzy just was tired of it. She was tired of her mother trying to turn her into something she's not. She didn't want to be a second Lexi, because in the Hulu series, it was mentioned that it was word for word. Elena said, "Oh, Lexi's my mini-me." She's making mini-me's. That's not what you do as a mom. You guide your kid into you help them make their own decisions and their own conclusions and figure out who they want to be. You don't make mini-me's. That's toxic as a mother. And I'm so happy that Izzy had the will and the realization that was happening to her, and she just fought against it. She took initiative to the point where Elena was fighting against Izzy, fighting against her. So Elena didn't appreciate what Izzy was doing, to the point that she kicked out Pearl and Mia. I think that's a little insecure, a little bit of an insecurity on Elena's part, because she couldn't handle that her daughter was getting these ideas of wanting to be different and not a perfect little girl. And so Izzy just reached her limit, and that's when she ran away in hopes of finding her friend Mia and her friend's daughter Pearl. And that's just, to me, overall, the three themes that popped the most in this novel: motherhood, identity, and conforming to society. They're all very, very touchy subjects, but the novel presented them in a way that was looked at many different perspectives, and that's super important to keep an open mind, and the novel helped do that. So I love that the author did that, to consider both sides of an argument, and that helped me as a reader decide what motherhood is and how identity should be approached, forming an identity, right? How could I do that? And it also helped me figure out why people follow the rules and fall under the spell of society having these expectations for women. And to wrap things up, I just wanted to thank you for your time and attention, and I really hope you enjoyed my PowerPoint slide as well as my voiceover. Thank you. Have a good night.